Hello listeners. In this topic of interviewing questions for hiring managers, clerks and entry-level staff, we would cover different kind of questions that one can ask in an interview. Here's the list of content to be covered. Introduction, interviewing tips, inappropriate interview questions, background interview questions, frequently sought skills interview questions, entry-level interview questions, clerical interview questions. Now let's begin with a small introduction about good interviewing skills. Good interviewing skills are a key for successfully selecting the best candidate. Asking the right questions helps you to identify the right person for the position. Asking the wrong questions can lead to legal difficulties. This presentation contains a variety of sample questions that you can ask. There are specific questions for managerial, clerical, and entry-level positions. There are questions to obtain information on the candidate's previous work experience and questions you can use to identify whether the candidates have frequently sought skills, example analytical skills. In addition, this guide also lists several inappropriate questions that you should avoid. Interviewing tips. To interview a prospective employee, the interviewer must also be prepared with the right kind of questions to be asked so as to avoid any kind of legal hassles. We have listed here few tips for your reference. Let's begin with what all things you must consider prior to the interview. Develop a list of job-related open-ended questions for all candidates. Questions should focus on the critical skills, work experience, key responsibilities, and education requirements. Review the candidate's resume and relevant work experience and prepare specific questions about their work activities. Now the list of advices to take care of during the interview. Put the candidate at ease and create a comfortable setting for the candidate. Ask open-ended questions. Listen and respond conversationally. Probe inconsistencies between what the candidate tells you and what the candidate's resume states. Probe for negatives. Request specific examples or illustrations. Allow the candidate to do most of the talking. Close the interview by thanking the applicant and giving the time frame for making the hiring decision. Even after the interview, these tips come handy. Complete the interview sheet. Use the interview sheet to compare candidates. Forward all completed interview sheets to your recruiter when the hiring decision has been made. To save yourself from all kind of embarrassment or legal trouble, you must avoid inappropriate interview questions related to age, sex, and marital status, like race, sex, sexual orientation or religion, nationality or citizenship, personal attributes, disabilities, or financial status. We will see few example questions related to the mentioned topics. Sample questions related to age, sex or marital status are: how old are you? What is your birth date? How do you feel about reporting to someone younger than you? How long you have resided at your present address? When did you graduate from high school? What is your marital status? What was your maiden name? Do you prefer to be addressed by Miss, or Mrs.? What is your spouse's name? And what is the occupation of your spouse? How many children do you have? What are the ages of your children, if any? What are your child care requirements, if asked of female applicants only? You should probe the candidate for race or sex or sexual orientation or national origin or religion. Of what groups or organizations are you a member? What church do you attend? Are you able to work weekends? Asking about someone's nationality or citizenship is not correct. Examples such as, of what country are you a citizen? What is your nationality? What kind of a name or accent do you have? What foreign languages can you read or speak? What was your father's surname? Embarrassing the candidate by asking about personal attributes is entirely unprofessional. Would you be willing to lose weight? Would you shave your beard or mustache? Not wearing certain articles of clothing, example a turban, during business hours. Disability questions might put the candidate into an awkward situation. Hence, such sample questions should not be asked. Do you have any physical disability? Do you have any history of mental disability? If you are interviewing an applicant with an obvious disability, discuss the position in terms of its duties, responsibilities, location and performance expectations. Tell the applicant what needs to be done on the job and give the applicant an opportunity to state how they could do it. Do not inquire as to what the applicant cannot do in the same way persons without disabilities can. Do not turn down an applicant because of negative assumptions or perceptions about persons with disabilities. Do not discuss how the applicant functions in personal or social activities or other persons with disabilities you may know. Persons with identical disabilities have different performance levels. Next is not to intrude into any candidate's financial life by asking, do you own or rent your place of residence? Do you own a car? Do you have any outstanding loans? Have you ever declared or had your wages garnished? You may ask questions related to daily activities. For example, would you tell me about your present last position? How would you describe a typical workday? What activities did you enjoy most at your last job? What do you consider the most critical elements in the successful performance of your present position? What job functions are most difficult for you and why? What problems have you encountered on the job? Which problems frustrate you the most? Why? And how do you deal with them? What was your greatest contribution in your present position? That is the past one. What recommendations have you made that were implemented? How have you improved your position from the one you originally accepted? How have your previous jobs prepared you for more responsibility? What are the reasons you left your last position? Other interview questions related to skills and relationships are about the skills, relationships, aspirations, self-assessment, and skills match. For skills, you can ask him, tell me about your skill experience in detail. What exposure had you had with skill? Please give me an example of a project where you used your skills. Tell me about how you have used your skills to be successful. Tell me about your relationships. Tell me about your working relationship with your supervisor. How do you support him or her? What do you feel are your supervisor's greatest strengths? Why? And what are the weaknesses? In what ways has your supervisor supported your performance? For what kinds of things have you been praised or criticized? Describe a successful relationship with someone from another department. Why is it successful? How could it be improved? Describe the traits that team members have that you work well with. What traits do you find difficult? What do you consider essential in the management of people? What type of task forces or projects have you worked on? What did you contribute? Few more questions that an interviewer must ask. One may ask to know a candidate better about the aspirations. What is important to you in a position? What would you like to avoid? What do you want to do 5 years from now? What are you doing to achieve your career goals? How will this position help you reach your long-term career goals? How do you define a successful career? Now about the self-assessment. As an employee, what are your greatest strengths and how have you used them? In what areas would you most likely to improve and why? What motivates you? And now the skill match. What do you believe qualifies you for this position? Tell me what you know about this position and what interests you about it. Given the skill set needed for this position, where do you think your skills are transferable? What elements of this position would be new to you? What additional training do you feel is required to achieve full proficiency? Based on the information I have provided, what do you think are the critical duties or skills required? To gauge a candidate's caliber, you may ask suitable questions related to one's ability in the following areas: analytical and problem solving, teamwork, flexibility, verbal communication, written communication, organization and planning, manageability, goals, risk and creativity. We will now discuss them in detail. Under analytical and problem solving, describe a situation on any job which you have held where you were faced with a problem. What did you do to solve it? Give an example of a situation in which you had to be relatively quick in coming to a decision. What was the outcome? Give an example of a situation in which you had to use your fact-finding skills to gain information for solving a problem. Then tell me how you analyzed the information to come to a decision. Give me an example of a problem which you faced on any job you have had and tell me how you went about solving it. For teamwork, give me an example of a time in which you feel you were able to build motivation in your co-workers or subordinates at work. What did you do in the last job to contribute towards a teamwork environment? Be specific. To check the flexibility, you may ask to describe a time in which you felt it was necessary to modify or change your actions in order to respond to the needs of another person. Tell me about a situation where someone was angry at you. How did you handle it? Describe an environment which you have worked where you had to deal with one crisis after another. How did you handle it? What is the most frustrating work-related experience have you faced? How did you resolve it? What do you do when you are being pressed for a decision? Describe a time when unexpected events demanded that you reschedule your time or rethink your approach. Give an example of when it was not possible for you to be flexible. How do you overcome objections to your ideas or goals? To test the candidate's verbal communication, you may ask, describe how have you gathered information and input from others. What is the toughest communication problem you have faced? Tell me about a time you have compromised successfully. Tell me about any formal representations or proposals you have made to management or customers. Give an example of a situation when you could have improved your communication with another person. Describe a situation in which you were able to effectively read another person and guide your actions by understanding of their individual needs or values. Describe a situation in which you were able to positively influence the actions of others in a desired direction. And to judge a person's written communication, you may ask, in your current position, what situations are better for written communication? Describe the most significant written document, report or presentation which you have had to complete. How well a candidate can organize or plan could be tested by probing like, what did you do in your last job in order to be effective with your organization and planning? Be specific. Describe a situation when you had to plan a task with critical deadlines. How did you plan to meet the deadlines? What did you do when short-term clashed with the long-term goals? Tell me about a time when your attention to detail paid off by avoiding a costly mistake or capitalizing on an overlooked opportunity. How good are your interviewees' managerial skills and could be assessed by asking to. Describe the most effective way your supervisor has given you direction. Describe a time when you responded well to criticism. Describe a time when you responded poorly to criticism. What disagreements have you had with your supervisor? Describe a time when you felt that management had made an emotional rather than logical decision about your work. What qualities should a successful manager possess? Give me an example of a specific occasion in which you confirmed or confronted a policy with which you did not agree. What type of management styles do you work best with? Following are few questions related to goals, risk, and creativity. Give me an example of an important goal which you have set in the past and tell me about your success in reaching it. Give an example of a time when you had to go above and beyond the call of duty in order to complete the job. Describe the most creative work-related project or solution you have developed. Tell me about a time when you had to do something or make a decision and there was no procedure to do so. Describe a situation when you took a risk. Tell me about a time when you took on a project or made changes to an existing procedure before you were asked to. How does your job relate to the overall goals of the company? Give an example of where you resisted pressure to do something because you knew it was not right. Describe a time when you rearranged things to be more effective. Now let's talk about few questions that you shoot to an entry-level candidate. It is important to check the candidate's background in depth. Some questions to clarify things are: why did you enroll at this university? How would you describe your academic achievement? How did you choose your major? What college subjects have you enjoyed most? What school year was most difficult and why? What changes would you make in your school? Describe your most rewarding college experience. What are your plans for future education? What extracurricular activities did you enjoy? How do you think college contributed to your overall developments? Do you think college grades should be considered by first employers? How do I know your capabilities? What have you learned from your mistakes in school? To judge candidates' work history, these questions might help. How would you describe the ideal job for you? What kind of work interests you most? Explain your understanding of this job responsibilities. Do you feel you still have anything to learn after all your years of academic study? Which summer job did you enjoy most? With how many levels of management did you interact? What was the job's biggest challenge? Tell me about a responsibility you have enjoyed. What has been your least valuable work experience? How would your references describe you? To interview clerks, we have also listed down clerical questions. These are: describe a typical workday. What skills can you bring to this position other than the ones required in the job description? What accomplishments are you most proud of? What aspects of your position give you most enjoyment? What aspects of your position cause you the most problems? What software packages are you familiar with? What activities do you use the packages for? How many people do you support? How many supervisors have you had at one time? Describe a situation where the needs of your supervisors conflicted. What did you do? How do you prioritize your work or day? Describe your experience with general office skills, example, copying, faxing, multi-phone lines, supplies, etc. I hope you now have a bank of questions ready to ask your prospective candidates. Thank you, listeners.